All right. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, as the case may be for some of you. Thanks for joining us today here for our BC Estimator release demonstration for release 4.11.11.3167 is the new version. My name's Adam, and I'll be going over some of the new features that we've released in this latest version. So hopefully everybody can hear me all right. And as we get started, I'm just going to remind you about in your webinar controls there, you have the option to be able to send in a chat message. So if you have a question along the way and you want to ask something, we'll see if we can get to that. So feel free to send those in, and if time doesn't allow, or if it's just not the right setting to be able to answer all those questions, we can certainly follow up with you after the fact as well. So make use of that. But in the meantime, if somebody might find that chat window and just let me know or confirm that you can hear me and that you can see my screen all right, just make sure that we've got the technology working correctly. So if somebody can just send me a quick chat message just to let me know that all of that's in place. Okay, looks like somebody can hear me. All right, perfect. Sounds good, and we can see the screen. Very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started again. My name's Adam, and so the new version here, 4.11.11.3167, we just sent out and made available to you all this morning. And the first place that we wanted to start with is really just a quick discussion related to the changes that are coming to not so much BC Estimator, but to BC Connect. So I'm going to pull this email over here that you all should have received, and if you read down far enough, for those of you who are users of BC Connect, coming this weekend on Sunday the 12th, there's going to be a fundamental change that happens for the BC Connect site of how logins happen in the background. So it won't be so much of a change for you, I don't believe, as far as users, but as far as how softwares that interact with BC Connect, such as BC Estimator, if you use BC Connect in association with it, some of that stuff will change in the background. And so because of that very fundamental change that's happening, before the 12th of August, you're going to want to stay on the old version of BC Estimator, what was there previously. The last version that released, which was version 31.37. That is 4.11.10.31.37. And you'll want to continue using that version until Sunday the 12th. And then on Sunday the 12th, you will need to switch over to this new version so that the interactions can continue between BC Estimator and BC Connect, that the proper login seats that's available. So again, just a fundamental change and switch. So for those of you who use BC Connect, just to state it one more time, if you use BC Connect in association with BC Estimator, you will want to stay on version 4.11.10.31.37 until this coming Sunday morning, August 12th. And at that time, you will need to switch over to this new version, 4.11.11.3167. And then you'll be able to continue on with your normal use as you would expect. So now that we've reviewed that, just a couple other things related to actually BC Connect and some possibilities that we've opened up. Over in the Publish tab here within BC Estimator, one of the options that you can choose to set up to export as an export style for a file of a report is you can now export a BC Connect style XML. So if you are wanting just the plain XML data that usually is populated over on BC Connect, this was what we normally sent up in the background from BC Estimator over to BC Connect, but you now have a way of actually producing that on your own from the Publish tab. So you would just come to the Publish tab, select the type of report type that you would want, select BC Connect as the format to use, and then you can publish that or export that to a location and then upload that or use that as you would have need for it. And also a side note, just another improvement that we've made, there was some issues with custom items. So custom type products that you may have created as you were working on your job in BC Estimator before, those weren't coming all the way through fully correctly over on the BC Connect site, and so we've handled some of those changes and fixed that so that those will work better in the future. So now getting into the program itself, into BC Estimator with some of the changes we've made, I'm going to head over here to the Plan tab. And the first thing I wanted to point out was just a minor change, but something just wanted to note is over in the takeoff items list here where it says the default pack. Previously, all we listed here was the pack name, but we've actually changed it now so that the pack name and the list name are reflected. So in this case, in this project, we have building 1 and building 2. And previously, it would have been hard to tell if the default pack was actually set for building 1 or building 2, since both of them contain the pack of second floor framing. But now, in the case of when you have 2 lists that are available, we'll append both that list name at the front of the name of the pack, so you can see clearly what it is. But if I was to come over here to my lists and just remove that second list, I come back to the Plan tab, you'll see that now just the pack name appears because, of course, there's nothing else that needs to be clarified. So just a small change there, but hopefully that's convenient for some of you who are working with multiple lists in multiple locations. Another new feature relates to blocking. Over here, we have this floor framing layout that we've created. And I'm going to come in and let's just say that we have a row of blocking over this bearing wall right here. So nothing too strange or unusual here as far as drawing it. So let's just say I'm going to draw in this blocking, and I'll give it the application of floor joist blocking and give it a product, and we've got it in place. And this is how we would have previously done this. But some users were wanting to have something that actually visualized a little bit more like blocking, so that as the layouts were being presented to the field, there was just more clarity around that, oh, that's blocking there, that's not something else. It's not just some stray joist or something else weird that's going on there. That's actually just blocking. So we've introduced a new condition for segment lines. So before I change this, we'll click this here and note over in the takeoff items list, I've got about 21 lineal feet of this blocking. I'm going to choose to right-click on this segment line, and I'm going to come to condition, and you'll notice that there's a couple of new options in the condition field. I'm going to choose to make this blocking no split, since I don't want to break the joist where this blocking is. I just want to add the blocking in. I'm going to do that, and then notice what happens. So that segment line now visualizes differently than it did before. It's broken apart by those floor joists and an extra little gap there, again, just for visualization, just to make it easy to see, oh yeah, that's a row of blocking that's happening at that location. You'll also notice that over in the takeoff items list that my total lineal footage reduced to only 18 lineal feet. And that's because the thickness of all of the joists that blocking is running through has been accounted for. So if these were doubles, then it would, of course would be more that would be removed. But I do want to point out that even though we're visualizing this with a gap in here, just so that it visualizes easy to see that those blocking pieces, when it calculates the lineal footage, this gap is not being removed. So you actually are getting the full length in between the joists. It's just the thickness of the actual joist that's being removed. And again, that will adjust based on the size of the joist or number of plies that may be involved. So if I was drawing more, I could do it again. I could draw more segments like this. You can put some mid-span blocking in up here on this span and across, and there I've got that same idea going on there. And then, of course, as we saw earlier with the condition, you could also choose to have a blocking with a split, so you could break the joists at that location. Another feature that we've added in, or maybe we should just say it's an improvement, again, based on a lot of different users' feedback, relates to the context menus. So many of you were saying that it would sure be nice if when you right-click to operate, like say on this floor container here, that if you didn't always close the context menu. And now previously, before this version, we kept this context menu open for you many times so that you could make several adjustments at once and then close the menu when you were done. But there were certain times when it just closed for you automatically and you really couldn't control that. So we've gone back through based on your feedback, and we've made exceptions or additional places where that context menu stays open. So at times where it previously closed, such as spacing on this floor container. Previous versions, if you change the spacing, the context menu would always close. But now we've changed it so you can change the spacing and that context menu stays open for you. So you can continue to make those changes and adjustments. And so you'll find other places throughout the program where we have done that same idea. We've kept that context menu open for you for your convenience. We haven't covered all of the cases in totally all situations, but the vast majority of them are now available for you to use and keep that menu open so you can work more quickly through those changes that you need to make. Another item that we've changed comes to resizing text boxes. So previous versions, when you created a notation right here on the page, you would need to draw it out really wide or do whatever you had to do to make that so the text was shaped the way that you wanted. But now we've given you the option to resize the text boxes. So when you click on an annotation note, you now have nodes to grab. So like you're familiar in other programs, you can just drag it out and the text will resize accordingly based on the bounds that you set for that box. So an improvement there with notes. In a similar fashion, we've also made a similar change for highlighters. So if you highlighted an area, you can now resize that highlighter to match the area that you actually want it to be on. And again, in a similar fashion, images that you may have added into your project, you can resize those just by clicking and dragging the nodes accordingly. So resizing of note boxes, highlighters, and images all can be done dynamically now within the digitizer. Moving on to the next area, comes to another dimension of page rescaling that we have introduced in this case. So I'm going to come down here to a different page, and we'll take a look at this layout that we've created. You can see that we've got joists, and as we take a closer look at it, we realize that, hey, wait a minute, that scale doesn't actually look quite right. Like, that's not 26 feet all the way across there, and the spacing of the joist is just clearly wrong. The page has been scaled incorrectly. And for this page, so in previous versions, you could right-click over here, and you could reset the scale to something else. But you didn't have a way to manually rescale a page. So when a scale needed to be set manually for a page because the scale was off, there wasn't a way to accomplish that, but now there is in this version. So we're going to come to this page, and I know that I need to manually scale this page in order to get it right. So I'm going to go start by going back to prep, where we would have done the scaling operation to begin with. So I'll click go to prep. And now that I'm in prep mode, you'll see that I have this new icon here where I can choose to remove the scaling lines or existing scale. So I'm going to do that. I'm essentially going to reset just the scaling lines for this item or the scale for the page. So now that I've done that, I can choose to add another scale to this page or basically reassign a scale to it manually. So I'll click it and I'll come in here, go over here, and draw that direction. And I'm going to say, yeah, that needed to be 25'3" to be accurate. And then over here on this direction, we'll again scale another direction, vertical, and make this 32'4" like it should be. Okay, and so now we've assigned the scale. So we've assigned both of our directions of our scale. And now we can click Go to Draw, just like you would have done the first time around, except this time, it's going to ask you, hey, do you sure you want to rescale? We'll confirm yes. And when it does, Now we've rescaled the page, and all the items that we've drawn on the page originally still remain, and they're specific points where we drew them at. So here you can see, so I've clicked this corner before, this corner, this corner. Here's all these nodes. They stay in the same relative spot on the page, but all of the scale about them has been changed. So you can see what used to be a 26-foot beam has now become a 13-foot beam. There are fewer joists on the page in this case, since the spacing has changed. It's still 16 inches on center, but of course now there's fewer joists because the scale is different. So all of that stuff adjusts and aligns. And so one area that you may need to pay attention to would be where your beams interact with beams. So of course, before, these beams weren't quite as big. So you can see we kind of have an overlap where this is overlapping into the other beam, because previously the beams were displaying as smaller. So that would be one area that you might need to go back and do a little bit of cleanup work on, which is easy to do. You just grab the node and slide it over, which is a good opportunity actually to point out where we have also made some improvements in the area of the ortho node movement, which we released last version of the software. You may remember that you can choose to click and drag on a node, and you can see here I'm just moving that node around. But if I push down the shift key while I'm in the middle of this dragging operation, you can see that now I can move this in a perfectly ortho fashion. So if I wanted to just slide this beam over in a perfectly horizontal fashion, I can just hold down shift, and that will move in the correct way. So we released that last release, but there were a couple of bugs with it, and it wasn't working as expected, like you might expect in all cases. And so we've made those changes just to make you aware of that, that behavior has been improved as well in this version. So there's the ability to be able to rescale a page, even if it has drawn items on it, and you can do it in a manual fashion now. Another thing that we've introduced in this version is the ability to suppress a group label. So here, I'm going to turn down the background over here so we can see this a little better. Here we have this group label, and let's just say, just for whatever reason, I wanted to be able to suppress or get rid of this group label, and instead I just wanted individual labels to show. Right-click here and choose Suppress Group Label, and that's exactly what's happened. So now I'm just left with individual labels on those joists, and I can choose to use the label collision logic and spread those labels around. So I've got that. But this also reminds us of another new feature that we've introduced, and that relates to the orientation of labels. So up to this point, labels have generally always displayed perfectly horizontal on the page. They haven't followed the orientation of the member. But now we've given you the option to be able to have your labels run in the same direction as the member itself. I'm going to come over to the Profile tab, come to the Labeling, and here there's a new checkbox called Label Orientation. It says Follow Member Orientation. I'm going to check that box, and I'm going to come back to Plan. And you'll see when I do, notice that all of the labels are now following the direction of their member. So members that run vertically on the page, the label runs vertically on the page. The labels members that run horizontally will run that direction. And you can also see, like over here, if I was to take this beam and drag it down in this fashion, then that label will also follow that same orientation. So that's a new option, again, over in the Labeling tab, where you can affect how the label orientation is taking place. Also related to labels, back over here in the Profile tab, you'll notice there's a few other columns over here on this label style area. So before, you really only had control over the size of the labels, which you still do. But now, if you wanted always to customize the look of your labels, so for example, let's say that with my hanger labels, I wanted them to appear differently than the rest. So I could choose a different font style. I could pick, make it a different color of text. And I could even change the background to be something else and even give it a different looking border. So I can make those changes, and I've made those for the hangers. If I come back to plan, I can see now my hanger labels reflect those different changes. So if you wanted your labels, your hanger labels, any other different types, you can now have control over how those look and feel, and also the size. And notice that it also applies to things like notes. So those annotation notes that you write on the page, you can control font style for those as well, and background, border color, and so on. Going back then, so yeah, so changes and ways to control those different options for labeling. Coming back over to the project tab, so one of the things that we introduced to you in the last release or so was the quick check feature, allowing you to create rules where you can have the program run through your list and make sure that you didn't miss something obvious, or you overlooked something that should have been caught in your takeoff process. And you have the ability to customize those things by going to the settings tab. So hopefully you've had a little bit of time in this busy market that I know it has been in the last months, but you've had some time to be able to customize that to fit your workflow and work style, and hopefully that's been a help to you. But based on some user feedback, one of the things that we introduced in this new feature is, for those of you who are making use of that quick check feature, is anytime that you run an output, so like you run a report or review a framing layout, it's first going to, in the background, run through that quick check feature, and it's going to look for any errors that might be popping up. So if we chose to view a report at this point, it's going to stop first and say, hey, there's a few things that you missed in this case. You know, you missed the stair stringers, no headers, a few other problems that are here, and so those show up for us to review. So though they serve as a reminder, you can just bypass it and just continue on with the error showing, or you could cancel it and choose to go back to the quick check feature and review what specifically was missed and make those changes. So in this case, let's just say that, you know, we looked at all these and we can just even dismiss all of them because we know they're all good. So there's no errors. We'll go back to reports, we'll click view. And in this case, we don't have any warning symbol or warning box come up because everything was all good. So the new thing we've introduced is the ability to have that quick check feature. In case you made a last minute change and then forgot to review something, it pops it up and gives you a reminder that, hey, you've still got an issue here. So you should address that before you go on and make your final outputs. Another change we've made comes to the Excel exports. So obviously you can export your project to Excel, which we'll do here, just a quick example. But when you do, one of the changes that we made, small change, last time that we sent out a release to you, we noted that you have this new notes tab down here at the bottom of your Excel export that has all of the notes that you contained. But now we've also made it so that it includes any image files that you may have posted there as well. So images are now included in your Excel notes export. Related to notes again, another improvement over here in the notes tab, you have the ability to auto attach a note to a framing layout. So if you have a note that you tend to apply to every layout that comes, that you create, so for example, like let's say the scope of work note, and that scope of work note is something that we have in our main template, and we apply to basically every framing layout that we create as we do our projects. If I was to check this box now any framing layouts that I create in the future, that scope of work note will automatically be applied and attached to that framing layout. So it's the ability to auto attach a note to a framing layout. Going over to the Framing Layouts tab, a small change, but it might be useful to many of you that you might just another feel-good feature, if you will. Here in the Framing Layout view, I'm going to click View. The navigation in the framing layout window you should find should be a little bit cleaner than it was before. You can now use the right mouse button to pan around in the window, and then the zoom in and the zoom out feature should be much more like you would expect as you experience over in the digitizer. So as you're reviewing just your framing layouts finally and you're polishing them up, you should find the navigation here much better. Another change we've also made is allowing the image to be over here in this empty space underneath the material list. So if I had a really long oblong building and I wanted it to be able to fit over here, I can now right click, choose reposition image, and this space over here underneath the material list and even down in the details section is available for me to make use of. So we've increased ability there. And it's not in this version, but just to give you a little bit of a hint at what's coming, I'll let you know that we're currently in the midst of making additional changes to framing layouts, giving you the ability to move around the material list, to actually drag it to a different spot. Same with framing details and have them lay out different directions. So more flexibility that we're actually currently working on and will be in the next release that we send out to you all. It will be more control over how the layout is laid out, and you do customize that for specific projects as you have different sizes and shapes of your buildings. So that's over in the framing layouts. Coming back to the list, something that isn't directly in your program or in the release that you have installed, but something that we have changed in the database. So it's something that you could get from us if you're interested, relates to hanger attributes. If you find that you specify a lot of hangers and a lot of custom type hangers, so like for example some LGUs where you have to specify the height or the skew or the slope of those particular hangers, previously you would have had to create a custom product and type all that out accordingly. But based on user feedback and make that a little more simple, we've now added in attributes to those hangers. So if I click on this LGU and I arrow to the right, some of the things that are available now is over here, I can specify what the height is for that specific hanger without actually having to type it out. And if I go further, I can indicate what is, if this was a 45 slope down, I could find that. And if it was a, skew left, 60 degrees or 36 degrees, I could pick that out. So we've added in a lot of those slope, skews, and heights so that you don't have to create so many custom hangers. So like I said, that isn't directly in the release. In the software itself, it's something that we would need to update your main template file. So if that's something that you're interested in and would want us to update your template file so you can get a hold of those attributes, custom height and slopes and skews attributes, just contact us and let us know and send a support email to our support address. So finally, finishing up, just a couple of small things here at the end. One has to do with under the Help tab. There's what has always been here before, the reminders of the What's This Help tool, where you can press F1 and learn about a particular feature, our online learning center. But something new that's been added here for BC Estimator users is the Boise Idea Portal. And if we click on this, it's just going to open up a web browser, and it's going to take us to the Boise Idea Portal site, and you would be able to give feedback. So if there's a specific feature request, or maybe you're just noticing a problem that you wanted to report and make us aware of, you could use that, or just contact us directly if it's an immediate problem. But you can put in ideas for the software of how it could be better, and those then can in turn be voted on, and so I'll let you explore that a little bit more, but just wanted to make you aware of under Help, About, you can go to the Ideas portal there and help make the software better and give your input on how it can grow that way. And then one last thing, I know because of how people's markets are set up, sometimes BC Connect, you don't necessarily make use of that because it just isn't the right fit for your business at this time. Also with this latest feature, if you go to a file and you close it, I'm not going to save that. And so you just at this particular portion of the menu just with BC Estimator open, you can go to Tools and go to Settings, and you can choose to enable or disable the BC Connect features. So if BC Connect just isn't the right fit for where you're at, but you do use BC Estimator, you can choose to disable some of those prompts that come up to allow you to interface with BC Connect. So you have that ability to check or uncheck that box now to be able to know those things off or on. So I think that brings us to the end of our review here this morning. If there's any questions, I didn't see any pop up throughout the meeting here, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And at the support email address, we're happy to explain any of these new things to you more, or if you have more input that you'd like to give us, I'd love to hear that. So thanks for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.